All right, thank you. I'm Jeff Belkora. I'm a faculty member at the University of California, San Francisco. I'm going to speak about patient decision support. And the way I think about this in terms of Ron Howard's work is the theme that I think underlies a lot of your work could be summarized, or I summarize it as healthy skepticism. Generally reflecting critically on our condition, generating liberating alternatives, and marching in the direction of our goals. So a healthy skepticism in medicine is something that we desperately need. I just put some pictures up of people who've been influenced by Ron's work as colleagues or as peers or as students. There's many others who have worked in pharmaceutical and biotech and related areas, but this is just thinking about patient decision support. I'm going to walk through the 6 elements of decision quality. And the first one is really frame, right? That's probably the most important one. And the work that we do with patients, a lot of it boils down to helping them reframe their interactions with doctors. And this is a quote from George Bernard Shaw, who said, all professions are conspiracies against the lady. I do not suggest that the medical conspiracy is better or worse than the military, the legal, the sacerdotal, the pedagogic, the royal, the aristocratic, the literary, artistic, innumerable industrial, commercial, and financial conspiracies, from the trade unions to the great exchanges, which make up the huge conflict we call society. But it, the medical conspiracy, is the least suspected. And so really, a lot of our work in bringing decision quality to patients is to help them overcome the cultural heritage we have to deference. And that cultural heritage probably comes from the origins of the medical profession in religion and in other kinds of authority. So that's really the first kind of framing notion. What it translates to in our everyday work with patients at UCSF is helping them understand that they're looking for Goldilocks treatment. There's a cultural disposition to thinking that the worst thing that could happen to you is you get undertreated. But it turns out in our fee-for-service healthcare system, and with all the conflicts just mentioned, there's a tremendous risk of being overtreated as well. So we're trying to communicate to patients to frame their mission as being super vigilant and looking for Goldilocks treatment. The 3 bears in this story are, number 1, the doctors and professionals themselves. Number 2, the payers who are trying to drive the car with their foot on the brake and control costs. And number 3, the producers, pharmaceutical, et cetera, who are pushing revenue. So the 3 bears are going to, they deserve their fair share of porridge, but we have to make sure the patient eats first. That's the frame on that. So now looking at alternatives, I'm going to tell a quick story about a patient who was referred to me very early in my career at UCSF and who had a suspicious finding on one of her ovaries. And so she went to see a doctor in the community who said, oh, well, we need to remove your ovaries, and while we're at it, we're just going to remove all of your reproductive organs. So that was the recommendation coming from this doctor. And so, we're at a fundamental level of decision hygiene in dealing with patient-doctor interactions a lot of the time. And so, my contribution to this patient was simply to say, look, you need to go get some other alternatives. So she ended up going to Stanford to get a second opinion. And there in the second opinion service, they said, yeah, you can absolutely watch and wait, actively monitor this situation with imaging, et cetera, for 4 to 6 months, and we'll stay on top of it. But when she went back to the original doctor who had made the original recommendation, he gave her a piece of information. He said, look, the last patient I saw in your condition was dead in 6 months. So that was sort of the level that what happens with patients a lot of times, and with all of us, is you have this fight or flight response to begin with. Your natural inclination is, I might have cancer, let's cut it out. And so my colleague Karen Sapuka has coined this term from decision quality. We need to help patients really consider their preferences. So well-considered preferences has become the term of art that we're using to get patients to move away from just the fight or flight instinctive reaction. And then the reasoning, what I've found is that although we would like to be able to do a full decision analysis for patients, the resources just aren't there. So we found that there are 4 channels of critical reflection that we really want patients to activate. And those 4 channels are thinking, talking, reading, and writing. And if we can just, again, we're at the level of decision hygiene here, if we can just get patients to balance those, so often a patient will be thinking and talking and getting conflicting recommendations and not doing much research and certainly not doing much writing. So Mark Twain said, "I write so I can see what I think." And so we found that, and I don't care if it's the analytic hierarchy process, I don't care if it's a pros and cons list, I would much rather see a patient start to write about their decision in any format. And it doesn't always have to be, again, at the level of decision hygiene, doesn't always have to be a decision analysis, but we want them to activate their faculties of critical reflection and start to get the checks and balances that you get when you activate all these 4 faculties of critical reflection. So I'm giving you just a whirlwind tour of the 6 elements of decision quality as they relate to the work that certainly I've done and some of my colleagues are doing with patients. And this last one being commitment to action. Again, the kind of biases that we have to overcome where in the case of the patient I was telling you about, the surgeon would say, you know what, I have a spot on my schedule in 2 weeks. Let's book it. And if you change your mind, we can always cancel it. And now the train has left the station. The default is we're doing the surgery. And in this case, this was a patient very early in my career. I wasn't able to turn that train around. And so that's a failure case that, that stayed with me. And luckily, I work in an environment where we have some very creative people. We realized that we need to meet force with force, that there's all these forces of bias and conflict that are leading patients to possibly very poor decisions. And what are we going to do about that? So we realized we needed a workforce. And unfortunately, there's really no funding for patient advocacy in our system currently. But my colleague Laura Esserman, a surgeon who directs the breast care center, had the idea of what if we recruited pre-medical interns? So these are the multiple classes of pre-medical students. Now we're bringing them over from Berkeley and training them to be patient advocates. And we're absolutely training them in the principles of decision quality and helping patients reflect critically on their decisions with this thought partner, a young person in training who accompanies them to all of their visits and helps them with this process of thinking, talking, reading, and writing about their decisions using the smart chip that I think Carl referred to earlier, what I think of as the Intel inside of decision quality. And so I want to echo the comments Eric made about all of these people know the name Ron Howard and are using the principles of decision quality. And so in many ways, and they're moving through the pipeline, by the way. They're coming out the other end of very long training. So for example, Dave Gellis up in the left-hand corner in 2005 is now in charge of clinical innovation at Iora Healthcare System, which is a very well-regarded, patient-centered kind of primary care delivery system. And so I'm very optimistic about the future in terms of spreading decision quality in the Ron Howard tradition, I think, face-to-face and heart-to-heart through mentorship. And so, Ron, I just want to say you're also the grand mentor to all of these students. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ron.